The crowd gasped. The tourist drew a cross. On the guard's tunic, smirking, but a second later, an iron grip clamped around his wrist. A cold voice cut through the air. "Don't move." But what happened next shocked everyone. Let's start from the beginning. Buckingham Palace was as crowded as ever. Tourists from all over the world bustled in front of the massive black gates, snapping photos, whispering and chatting in different languages. Some were taking selfies, others were focused on the silent, motionless guards, standing still, like statues carved from stone. Among the crowd was Josh Harper, a 45-year-old American with a puffy face, sunburnt skin, and heavily tattooed arms, the ink faded from time. On his head, he wore a bright red baseball cap with a yellow snake and the words, "Don't tread on me," its color washed out from too many days in the sun. He looked bored. Josh lazily glanced around, his hands shoved into the pockets of his worn-out khaki shorts. His white tank top was wrinkled, and near the collar a small yellow stain, mustard, sauce, stood out. "So, they just stand there?" he muttered, yawning and rubbing his stubbled chin. "Man, this is dull." The guards in front of him looked like something straight out of a museum exhibit. Red tunics, polished white belts, towering black bearskin hats. They didn't move. Not when kids waved their hands in front of them, not when people tried to make them laugh. They simply stood still, staring into nothingness. The crowd watched in awe, admiring their discipline. People were respectful, keeping their distance, whispering about how impressive their stillness was. But Josh was bored. "Yeah, whatever," he mumbled, waving a hand dismissively. The clicking of cameras around him started to slow. One question hung in the air. Do they even move? Josh turned his gaze to the nearest guard, squinting mischievously. Standing before him was a tall, fit young man with sharp cheekbones, pale skin, and a tense jawline. He was young, but the way he stood, his rigid posture and his stone-cold expression made him look almost unreal, more statue than man. Josh narrowed his eyes. "You could at least blink, dude," he muttered, chuckling. But no one around him laughed. Then an idea popped into his head. A crazy, stupid, bold idea. Slowly, he slid a hand into his pocket and felt the smooth plastic of a marker. A black marker. The crowd had no idea what was about to happen. Josh grinned and pulled it out. "All right, fellas, let's add a little personality." His hand moved forward. Josh stepped closer, feeling his adrenaline spike. His heart pounded, his grip on the marker tightened. He knew he was about to do something forbidden, and that's exactly what made it so exciting. Before him stood the British guard, tall, pale, with sharp features, looking almost unreal against the bright red tunic and towering black hat. He didn't move. He didn't react. His eyes, locked into the distance, seemed to stare through Josh as if he didn't exist. The crowd behind Josh was starting to catch on. "Hey, what's he doing?" someone whispered. "Oh my God, that's the British guard. Is he insane?" A few stepped back, not wanting to be caught in whatever was about to happen. Others raised their phones, ready to record the scandal unfold. But Josh wasn't listening. He felt like the main character, the star of the show, the guy who dared to challenge tradition. Before him stood a living symbol of British monarchy, a man who had sworn not to move, no matter how much people provoked him. But was that really true? Josh stared at the guard's frozen expression, at his clenched jaw, at his lips pressed into a thin line. This man was supposed to be emotionless. But for some reason, Josh could sense something dangerous beneath the surface. Did that stop him? No. It only made it more thrilling. His fingers tightened around the marker. Thick, bold, permanent ink. Nobody fully grasped how stupid this was. until it was too late. Josh took one more step forward. A thought flashed through his mind. I'll remember this for the rest of my life. His hand shot forward. The marker touched the fabric. A thick black X slashed across the smooth red tunic. The crowd gasped. The sound was deafening. Josh instantly stepped back, admiring his art, a black cross on the bright red uniform. Bold, stark, completely out of place. The guard didn't move, but something had changed. The air felt different. Josh turned to look at the crowd. They were staring at him, wide-eyed. Some were shocked. Others had their lips pressed tight, trying not to laugh. But most of them simply couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. They weren't laughing. They were frozen. And that's when Josh realized something was very wrong. Slowly, he turned back to face the guard. At that moment, the guard moved. An iron grip clamped around Josh's wrist like a trap. "Don't move!" The voice cut through the air like a knife. Low, cold, absolute. The crowd gasped. Josh didn't have time to react. He didn't step back, didn't even fully register what had just happened. All he could feel was the unbelievable strength of the fingers locked around his arm, squeezing like a steel vice. 1 second. 2. The guard moved. The guard who wasn't supposed to move. The crowd erupted. "Holy crap! I thought they couldn't move." "Dude, you're screwed. You actually touched a guard." But Josh heard none of it. His entire body felt frozen in place. His heart slammed against his ribs. What the hell? They weren't supposed to react. They were just supposed to stand there. His eyes shot up to the guard. That look. The same eyes that had been empty and indifferent just seconds ago were now burning straight through him. Cold. Predatory. Unrelenting. Josh's mouth went dry. Hey, man, chill. It's just..." His voice wavered, but he forced a nervous smirk, as if this was all just a joke. The guard didn't blink. Behind him, the crowd was no longer just watching. They were whispering, recording, reacting. Some laughed nervously. Others stood in stunned silence, but no one stepped in. This moment belonged to the two of them. The guard still held Josh's wrist, and his ice-cold gaze never wavered. Josh tried to yank his arm back. The grip didn't budge. A chill ran down his spine. This was no longer a joke. The guard's eyes weren't angry. They weren't furious. They weren't emotional at all. They were just cold, detached, unstoppable. That was worse than shouting. Worse than a threat. The guard wasn't mad. He was just doing what had to be done. The crowd's whispers grew louder. Some laughed nervously. Others looked genuinely concerned. "I told you this wouldn't end well. Wait, they can actually use force if provoked? Oh man, he's done for." But the worst part? The helplessness. The guard wasn't even trying. And Josh couldn't break free. His wrist ached from the pressure. He forced a strained grin, trying to play it off. "Look, man, it's just a marker, right? Just wipe it off." The guard didn't blink. The grip didn't loosen. The crowd fell silent. The world seemed to hold its breath. What happens next? The iron grip was still there. Josh could feel it crushing his wrist, burning against his skin. He wanted to yank his arm free, to run. But he knew he couldn't. This man, motionless just seconds ago, was now an unstoppable force. The crowd wasn't just watching anymore. People were recording, whispering, reacting. Some were laughing nervously. Others spoke in hushed, worried voices. But there was no time to think. The answer came fast. From behind the guard, cutting through the tourist-filled square, came two men in dark blue uniforms. royal security. Their movements were sharp, controlled, emotionless. Their faces, cold. Their steps, silent and certain. This wasn't chaos. This wasn't a surprise. This was just another routine. They didn't analyze the situation. They didn't ask questions. They simply came to do their job. Josh barely had time to swallow before one of them barked out a command. "Hands behind your back!" It wasn't a request. It was a command, and it happened in an instant. A sudden movement, rough hands clamping onto his arms, wrenching them behind his back, sharp pain in his shoulders, total control. What? For what? It was just a joke. Josh struggled, twisting his body, but their grip was absolute. He wasn't in control anymore. They turned him so fast he barely had time to catch his breath. What the hell? They're seriously this strict? His mind screamed. The crowd gasped. People who were filming seconds ago were now watching with wide eyes. Some had even lowered their phones. Others kept recording, but their expressions had changed. Dude, he's actually screwed. They don't mess around with this stuff. Man, I wouldn't want to be him right now. But the worst part? No one helped. Not a single person. Josh frantically scanned the crowd, hoping to lock eyes with someone, anyone who might stand up for him. But all he saw were cold, amused, or even judgmental faces. Where was his funny moment? Where was the crowd that was supposed to laugh and pat him on the back? These same people, who had been chuckling and hyping him up just minutes ago, were now looking at him differently. Some with disgust, some with indifference. Not a single person looked sympathetic. Josh felt a cold, creeping fear crawl up his spine. He was actually in trouble. He thought this would be a joke. He thought everyone would laugh along. But he was the only one who wasn't laughing. Dragged away. Josh was hauled past the barriers, and no matter how hard he tried to resist, he was completely powerless in the grip of the two security officers. The crowd parted before them, but no one moved too far away. People craned their necks, stretched out their arms, filming every second of the moment. The cameras followed him like 1,000 unblinking eyes, soaking in every detail. Some tourists exchanged glances, some whispered, and others laughed openly. For most, this wasn't just a spectacle. It was the highlight of their day. A few people stood off to the side, looking uncomfortable. But they were in the minority. No one rushed in to help. No one protested. No one stood up for him. Josh caught a glimpse of a few teenagers, laughing and waving at him while shouting something in their own language. A British man in a suit, holding a newspaper, simply shook his head, as if watching yet another dumb tourist who had brought this on himself. Josh tried to turn his head to say something, but a rough yank forced him to face forward. He wasn't in control anymore, not even of his own body. Every step, every movement was now dictated by the security officers. His wrists were locked behind his back, held in a grip so tight there was no chance of escape. The more he struggled, the stronger the hold became. Behind him, the crowd buzzed with excitement. Someone shouted sarcastically, "Dude, you just officially screwed up." "They literally tell you not to touch them. Now you can go home and tell everyone how the British Army works." Josh gritted his teeth. He wanted to say something, but he knew any protest would be pathetic. The same people who had been watching his stunt with curiosity minutes ago were now looking at him with pure embarrassment. This wasn't funny anymore. This wasn't a cool story for his friends. This was humiliation, and it was being broadcast to the world. The internet explosion. The next day, the internet blew up. Footage of Josh's arrest spread across every platform: Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok. His face was now known worldwide. Social media algorithms pushed the video to thousands of users, who watched in fascination as the guards locked his arms and escorted him out of the palace grounds. The videos racked up hundreds of thousands of views in hours. Comment sections exploded. The headlines were merciless. American tourist defaces British Guards uniform and gets instant karma. Dumbest prank ends in total humiliation. This tourist thought he could do anything. The British Guard proved him wrong. Foolish or reckless. How one American became a meme in 10 seconds. The most popular clips featured slow-motion replays, Josh drawing the X, then getting grabbed in an instant. Thousands of users flooded the comments with sarcasm and brutal humor. That was the fastest punishment I've ever seen. The guard just looked at him, and his whole life flashed before his eyes. When you think it's funny, but now you're facing actual charges. This guy wanted to be famous. Mission accomplished. Just not how he planned. Some users edited the footage with dramatic music, turning it into a cinematic moment of doom. On TikTok, people started mocking the incident, making parody videos where they pretended to mess with a guard and instantly got karma. The cost of a stupid idea. By morning, Josh woke up famous. But it wasn't the kind of fame he wanted. His face was now a meme. His name was known by thousands. And almost no one was on his side. Even among his own friends, there was a tense silence. No one laughed. No one tried to comfort him. Because they all knew. This wouldn't be forgotten anytime soon. Josh didn't even bother opening social media, but the notifications flooded his phone anyway. Hundreds of DMs from random strangers, all mocking him. How's the British Army treating you? Still locked up? Your new nickname, Josh X. Harper. Congrats, you made it into the How Not to Behave Abroad textbook. He wanted to turn off his phone, but he knew it wouldn't help. It was everywhere. And the irony? He actually became famous. Just not in the way he wanted. And now, one thing was crystal clear. The British Guards aren't decoration, and drawing on their uniforms, quite possibly the dumbest idea ever.